All right, good morning. How's the press doing? Y'all all ready? The members of Bessie that are here, why don't y'all come on up as well? If you want to come over on this side, balance this out.
Any other legislators?
Any other legislators that are here?
Officials?
Are there any other legislators? All right, we don't want to miss anyone. Well, good morning. Some 8 years ago, when I had an opportunity to serve as the Attorney General, and Liz Murrill, who is now the Attorney General, came to work for us, and we created a Solicitor General's office together with a vision of making sure that we were able to defend the things that were important to the citizens of the state of Louisiana. And so this morning, the Attorney General has a very, very important announcement I'd like to bring up to the podium. General?
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. At midnight, the Department of Education published new Title IX regulations with over 400 pages of small print, and 13 minutes later, we sued the Biden administration. So with a stroke of a pen and over 400 pages of rules written by would-be lawmakers in Washington, D.C. conference rooms, the DOE published Title IX regulations intended to remake American societal norms through classrooms, lunchrooms, bathrooms, and locker rooms of American schools. Make no mistake, these rules eviscerate Title IX. They are entirely contrary to what Title IX was intended to achieve and what we have implemented and understood Title IX to mean and to protect for 50 years. The law, Title IX, was passed to protect against pervasive discrimination against women, against biological women. This is federal government overreach, but it's of a degree and a dimension like no other. It's a naked attempt to strong-arm our schools, our faculty, our staff, our administration, and state government officials into molding children in the federal government's preferred image of how a child and how an adult should think, act, and speak. The rule is an affront to the dignity of families and school administrators everywhere, and it's not legal. So the central feature, before we I'm gonna have some other people come up here and talk, and we'll open it up for questions from the press. The rule is detailed. Its central feature is DO's extraordinary move to transform Title IX's focused prohibition of discrimination on the basis of sex, which has always been understood to be biological sex, to include discrimination based on gender identity. And everything else flows from that change. And gender identity, which is, as we understand it and as it has been used, including in litigation in Louisiana since 2016, is a very, very, by design, ambiguous term. And yet in 400 pages of rules, the Department of Education never defines it. That's extraordinary in and of itself. It describes it as a student's subjective and internal sense of his or her. This is part of what's crazy about this rule. It has to define itself in terms of gender, internal sense of his or her gender. And based on that move, DOE sets out to remake the whole educational system and our children in that process. So here are some examples of some of the things that it does. It prohibits single-sex bathrooms and locker rooms. It compels school officials to use pronouns associated with the student's claimed gender identity. It forces students to do so as well. Requesting documentation to verify the sincerity of a person's claimed gender identity might violate the rule. It will lead to litigation. There is a guarantee that it will lead to litigation, because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you don't protect biological women, then you violate Title IX. If you do protect biological women, you violate Title IX. Same is true for men, although we have found that this rule was designed to protect against the pervasive discrimination against biological women. So here are some of the consequences of the rule. Boys and girls will be forced to share bathrooms, locker rooms, and perhaps lodging on overnight field trips with members of the opposite sex. They'll be forced to use the preferred pronouns or face punishment. It raises distinct free speech and free exercise problems. Parents may never hear about unapproved so-called gender-affirming counseling that their children receive because the rule allows a school to conceal that information from parents in certain circumstances. Teachers and other school administrators are forced to create and carry out employee training programs on the 423-page rule to change school policies and begin construction on their schools, modifying school bathrooms and locker rooms. It still won't be enough because they'll still be exposed to agency investigations and private litigation because Title IX already has a private right of action. Finally, states, education agencies, and schools will run into DOE's coercive power to withhold billions of dollars in federal funding. Louisiana alone is projected to receive $2.6 billion this year. Billion. So that is what the Supreme Court means when it talks about the proverbial gun to our head. We can't say no to a loss of $2.6 billion. We can file a lawsuit, and we have done that. Ben, come up here, please. I want to introduce you to my Solicitor General, Ben Aguinaga, who, and I would just point out that drafting these lawsuits and preparing them in the right way, thoroughly, and examining a rule of 423 pages that comes against the backdrop of 50 years of other regulations and lawmaking is an extraordinary task. It's like launching an aircraft from an aircraft carrier. And Ben did that last night at 13 minutes after the rule was published. So I want to thank you for your work and for your staff's work. And my staff, I am so proud of them. I mean, Jeff put us in a position to create the Office of the Solicitor General. I've been privileged to be that Solicitor General for 8 years, and now I have my replacement, and his job is to make it better, and he is doing that. So back to the rule. These aren't close questions. This rule guts the essence of Title IX. It destroys decades of advancement for equal opportunity for women and girls, and it's been extraordinarily successful. If you look now at universities across the country, we have soccer, we have lacrosse, we have swimming, we have gymnastics. In fact, this year we had a national championship in gymnastics. Last year we had a national championship in basketball, and we were in the Final Four this year. Title IX brought this to us. Title IX is what has created these opportunities for women. And this rule eviscerates that. The DOE, in a too cute by half move, attempts to avoid the issue of athletics. It punts on it and it says, this doesn't apply to athletics, but it does apply to athletics because you can't redefine the application and meaning of Title IX and not affect athletics. So it doesn't matter that they're going to wait and follow up with an athletics rule. That just tells us that this is going to get worse, not better. But it does apply, and because it has to, there's just no way that you can say that it's discrimination if we don't allow this application to bathrooms, locker rooms, overnight field trips, but we go back to a traditional understanding of Title IX for athletics. So you can't write around that problem, and that is part of the claims that we've made in the lawsuit. I have a lot of background information that I can give you, but I want to let some other people talk. Specifically, I want to bring Cade Brumley, who has been a fantastic partner with me in this. He has been advising superintendents to try and manage the concern that is arising from everywhere. I do expect more school boards to join our complaint, and we will continue from there. Right now, the litigation involves state of Louisiana through the Office of the Attorney General and the Department of Education as the lead plaintiffs. And we also have Montana, Idaho, and Mississippi. So I would like to thank their attorney generals. They are leaders. They are leaders too. They all stand to lose billions and millions, some billions, some millions of dollars. Lynn Fitch has been an extraordinary leader on this topic. She has traveled the country. She has brought Riley Gaines and traveled with Riley Gaines, who has told her own personal story about how she was unfairly discriminated against in a competition and forced to give a trophy because there was only one trophy, y'all. And it went to Leah Thomas, the biological male, who she had to compete with, and the entire team had to undress with in a locker room. So we have these concerns here. They are now a true and present danger to women in schools. And I'm going to let Cade talk a little bit about that.
Cade Brumley, Louisiana Department of Education, State Superintendent. Governor Landry, thank you for hosting us here today, and thank you for your outstanding leadership. Attorney General Murrill, thank you for the partner that you are and taking this issue as a priority and doing everything within your power to help the state of Louisiana. Look, Governor Landry, AG Murrill, the state legislators, members of the State Board of Education who are with me here today have all been really great partners on this issue. This is a line in the sand issue. This is a bridge too far for the state of Louisiana and across the country. I think it's a challenge to both common sense and state sovereignty here in Louisiana and across the country. These Biden radical revisions recklessly endanger children throughout the state of Louisiana and across the country. They seek to dismantle longstanding protections for equal opportunity for females in athletics, and they will create unnecessary bureaucracies as our schools and school systems seek to police these impossible rules. To school systems, my message is clear. I've already shared with you last week. I share with you again today. Do not comply. Allow this process, this legal process to unfold. Rely on our office if you need support, but do not comply with these radical rules from the Biden administration. Governor, we stand ready to assist you at the Louisiana Department of Education. Attorney General Murrill, we stand ready to assist you from the Louisiana Department of Education. And legislators and members of our state board, you know that is true for you as well, as we fight against this radical challenge that, as the Attorney General says, eviscerates everything that we've known to be true about Title IX. At this time, I'd like to welcome back to the podium the great governor of the great state of Louisiana, who is leading very early on in this term, Governor Jeff Landry.
Thank you, Kate. General, it reminds me about how much important work y'all do at the Attorney General's office. There's a little bit of jealousy here to think about how nice it had been to be the Attorney General in this kind of suit. But I think that the people of Louisiana get to see in action the work that the people that they sent to this city, to this capital, can do to protect the things that they hold near and dear. The Bessie members, the legislators that are here. I was thinking, both Sharon's mother and my mother both played women's basketball in the 50s and the 60s, of course, in a parochial school under which it was all women's school. So that was pretty easy. There was no competition as to who would be competing for those athletic spots. But again, if you had heard, when she left there and then went on to coach and to teach in a public school system, she had to fight to make sure that her women had court time. Like in 1972 was when Title IX was brought about. It was brought about to make sure that women had an opportunity and that were put on the same footing as men and given the opportunities to compete in their sports. And to think of where we are right now, the fact that the Biden administration and many in this country have basically lost their moral compass. Okay? They absolutely have. The fact that we will now push women out of positions simply because there are people out there that want to identify as an opposite sex. They can want to do a lot of things. I would love to identify as Shaquille O'Neal. I really admired him. However, I can't go down to the LSU basketball men's coach and say, hey, I'm identifying today as Shaq and I want that scholarship and I want to play. Okay? He would absolutely laugh me off the court. And that's where we are. That is how absurd what the federal government has done. And I will tell you that whatever lever that the governor's office has, whatever power either the Constitution or the statutes vest in me, we will 100% be standing behind this legislature, behind this Attorney General, and behind the Bessie board, because you know what? We do not intend to comply. We are not going to pretend that there is some other form of sexual category other than the one that the Almighty has set forth. And that is only two of them. So again, I want to thank the Attorney General. I want to thank the Superintendent of Education and the legislators that are here and the Bessie members. And look, we look forward to this fight, because you know what? This fight is right. And and make no mistake, the object of this fight is to ensure that we protect women, okay, and that we protect women's sports. So thank you, General.
Thank you. I would like to ask Beth Mizell to come up and say a few words. She's unprepared for this call out. She's been, leading with the Women's Caucus in the legislature, and I know that they've been addressing and closely, it's a bipartisan group of women in the legislature who have been working hard to address issues related to women in Louisiana, and I'm proud to support them. I've always been proud to stand by Beth and the work that she's doing. So if you want to just speak for just a minute, and then Mike Johnson, Rapides Parish, also is joining. They have a lawsuit. They will be joining and filing soon. There are other school boards that we've been talking to. School boards, as you know, have to have meetings and ratify a decision to join, and that takes a little bit of time sometimes to schedule a meeting. But I do expect a large number of school boards to join us in suing.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Attorney General. We're here. We're fighting again. I mean, we've gone through this fight. We struggled with fairness in women's sports to get that through. And again, the emphasis of fairness in women's sports is why we're all here. It's about fairness. We fought a long time for women to have the opportunities that they finally had, and we've reached, in some ways, the pinnacle. But this is a challenge that we can't turn away from, and I really appreciate Superintendent Brumley's strong stand. I appreciate the directness from the governor and the Attorney General. And I'm hoping the women here who've all fought to be where we are in this room stand firm for the women that are young women trying to get into sports and win those scholarships. We heard some compelling stories during that testimony, and I hope they echo in our ears. So thank y'all for your attention.
Thank you. I first want to just thank our governor and our attorney general, and of course our superintendent of education for their leadership. I'm proud to serve at a time where I think we're all on the same page on something real simple: what is right and what is wrong. And I am proud to represent Rapides Parish, the Rapides Parish School Board, who became aware of this issue and this possibility as early as last August. And in fact, October passed a resolution unanimously, bipartisan, unanimous vote to, if this came to fruition, which unbelievably it has, that we will file suit. And in fact, we have waited for the Attorney General, and now we are going to file suit today to try to protect our young ladies, our children. Something I don't think many of us, sometimes this world seems like it's just turned upside down. And we have gone from shock to anger to resolve that the state of Louisiana, and particularly Rapides Parish, is not going to give way to craziness and is going to represent what's in the best interest of our children. It's incredible that something that was so hard fought for our young ladies would be basically crushed and destroyed with the stroke of a pen. Not the legislature, not the Congress, but by the president, who simply decided that these rights that were earned by our young ladies to protect our young ladies and our children no longer apply, and to destroy something that's so important to their future and the future of our youth. And I think, quite honestly, that's significant to our society. So I am proud to join with our Attorney General and Rapides Parish, who will be standing tall with her to defend the rights of our young ladies and our children. And that suit will be filed today. And I encourage other parishes to do the same. I'm also proud to be part of a legislature who has made their legislative intent very clear over these last few years, which is certainly in support of the action that this state is taking. So with that, thank you again for your leadership and for your assistance.
Yours too. I want to make one comment before I open it up for questions. And I want to acknowledge someone who's standing up here, Brinley, who is competitive cheer student. And just by standing here, she risks a lot. I have spoken to coaches about this. They are unable to speak. This rule gags them. Before this rule was even adopted, for the last 3 years, there have been multiple actions, and I can walk you through them. They are in our complaint. You can see all of this mapped out in the complaint. But the Biden administration has been threatening people for a long time. And so there is a lot of retaliation built into the system that has been very effective. And so it prevents women. This is so pernicious. This is just such an insidious thing about the rule. This is a rule that was adopted to help women overcome invidious discrimination. And now we are threatened if we complain about the evisceration of the very protection that was built to help us. So I want to thank you for being here, because you represent a lot of people. And you really do. I doubt you realize it. I think Riley Gaines has had death threats. She has been out. She has refused to bow to the pressure. But that's a hard thing to do. Coaches may not be able to recruit. Coaches may get fired or lose their jobs or never be able to move somewhere else. They may be protected in Louisiana, but they may not be able to go anywhere else. The NCAA still hasn't decided where it stands on this, even though the organization that governs independent schools on athletics, I think, has. So, there is an enormous amount at stake for so many women when they dare to complain. So I want to thank you for being here. So, questions? Injunctive relief, vacature in the immediate run-up will ask for a temporary restraining order or a temporary a preliminary injunction against the rule. Well, I've personally been called a bigot by Bob Mann on Twitter. Yeah, for a complaint, for just acknowledging, by the way, that when I think Penn State or University of Pennsylvania, one of those schools, nominated Leah Thomas for Woman Athlete of the Year for Sports Illustrated, I pointed out they couldn't find a single biological woman athlete, not one, to nominate. And I was called a bigot. So that's just me, and I'm a public official. I wasn't then. I guess you could say I was, because I was Solicitor General, but I spoke out in my personal capacity. And all I did was acknowledge that there are thousands of women athletes out there fighting every day to get where they are, and not one they didn't get nominated.
I just wanted to clear, because I took that to mean maybe somewhat in the Biden administration. Is anybody in the Biden administration issuing threats? And if so,
No, this comes in different forms. So it comes in the form of complaints against Title IX, as a violation of Title IX, which triggers a whole investigation process at the university and school level or the Department of Education. It comes in the form of private lawsuits for discrimination, which has been, there's an implied right of action under Title IX, so private people can sue. It also comes in the form of threats to our funding. So I don't believe Gabe's going to tell me when there's an overt threat to our funding, but I can tell you that I'm sure it's coming, because we are not going to comply. Now, we filed a lawsuit to protect us from that retaliation, but they put the rule out. So they've said this will be in the form of investigations and possible loss of funding. It's in the rule. Another question?
General, transgender children often face very high suicide rates, and it's estimated that there's thousands of transgender people that live in Louisiana, what would you say to the kids that are maybe nervous about seeing what's going on and are looking just to get through the day and go to school?
I'd say let's address that problem. We can address that problem. I'm not denying that they may face some challenges when they're in school. I don't think that means that we have to deny what the effect of this rule is for biological women and on Title IX. I mean, it's just apples and oranges.
Would you say that, prohibiting them from going into restrooms or what have you, that they identify with can be harmful to their own identity?
I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. I mean, maybe we can have spaces. I've worked with Roger Wilder on his bill to make sure that there are spaces that are safe spaces. But that doesn't mean my niece has to change in a bathroom with a student who is not a biological female. I don't think that's right. I mean, she can't speak. Riley Gaines had to do the same thing. Like, there is, I mean, that may be a problem that we need to address and make sure all students should be safe. We have an obligation to make sure that those students are safe. But that doesn't mean that we have to deny that biological women are biological women. Is there another question?
You mentioned a lot about the rules' impact on athletics. Now, the Biden administration says that they're going to address that issue in a separate rule. Can you speak on what impact you think this rule will have on athletics?
I think that they understood the political consequences if they had directly addressed athletics at this time. But make no mistake, this rule governs so much about athletics: locker rooms, bathrooms, scholarships, university policies. All of that is embedded in athletics. So it doesn't really matter that they said we're going to come back later and issue another rule. That just means they're going to see how this goes, and then they're going to be even more specific if they can get away with it. That's what that means. It does apply to athletics. There is no way that you can avoid that problem. I mean, you can't redefine Title IX and redefine what it covers in a way that eviscerates any meaning for biological women and not say that does, and then say that doesn't affect athletics. I mean, it's like, it's like asking somebody to not believe what's right in front of your face.
So is your primary concern with the athletics issue the locker room issue?
No, I mean, athletics also involves scholarships for women. I mean, Brindley's been working all through since middle school, since elementary school, like many, many other women. I mean, men too, they start preparing their career in athletics sometimes when they are in third grade or kindergarten. I mean, it is a problem when the Department of Education, we could get rid of the entire federal Department of Education. We don't need them to tell us how to think and act. I mean, this is ridiculous. They are abusing a grant, and they are changing the terms and conditions of the grant. We didn't agree to this. We've been applying Title IX, and by the way, so has the federal government, consistently for 50 years, the way the federal government intended it, to protect biological women. And now this administration wants to change the meaning of words, and in doing so, change the entirety of federal law. That's not how this works. Congress writes the laws, not an administrative agency or an administration that desires to affect social change that it can't get through Congress.
We have time for one more question.
Attorney General and Governor, y'all have both touted transparency as a major part of your platforms, your administration early on the campaign trail as well. How do you reconcile that with the bills that you're supporting for rollback public records access?
Yeah, he could speak to that. I would like to make a comment about this, by the way. I have seen the coverage on this. Yeah, it is entirely wrong. I mean, we've been applying the deliberative process. It is recognized in jurisprudence. I mean, I have seen some of the commentary. I saw in New Orleans yesterday an opinion on one of the news stations, and it was entirely misrepresenting what the law does and what the law is. So, it is not an attempt to hide all decision-making from the public. It simply does not do that. And it is misrepresenting what the bill does and what the law is now to say that. It is simply intended to allow for frank discussions from high people working with a decision maker that protects that decision-making process. It doesn't hide the decision. It doesn't hide the implementation of the decision. It doesn't hide a myriad of other things. So I would just say that I think that it's incorrect to say that we are against transparency. We're not. I'm not. I mean, I enforce the open meetings laws, and I train on the public records laws. So I can tell you that so much debate on this has misrepresented what the bill does. And I'll let him say what he wants to say.
Yeah. We did the same when I was at the AG's office. And I'll tell you this, you're right. The reporting that's going on is literally malpractice. Okay. Since 1940 to 2008, the public records law was designed to allow the taxpayers the information they needed to watch the way the money of this state and its local governments were spent. And in 2008, we decided to tinker with it. And then in 2015, they tinkered with it again. And from that time, we have watched a weaponization. We don't have to look much further. Look at what's going on at the national level with a candidate for the presidency of the United States, who, by the way, was the president of the United States. And not only that, but look at what's going on with a former president's nephew and the way they treat him. Look, this is a complete misrepresentation by the press and by those organizations who consistently want to do nothing more than to chill honest debate between those elected officials and others and their constituency in trying to shape the public policy. No one has been more transparent than us. In fact, I think it was you, Jim, that might have asked me that question back when we were in the midst of transitioning, whether we were going to identify for y'all at the time or make open the meetings that our transitional committee engaged in. I remember asking you if y'all would like to open up the times when y'all go before the editors and y'all discuss how y'all print the stories that end up on the front page. And I don't think there was really no response. And so again, I would echo this. This bill that has seemed to have gained so much criticism has never even had an opportunity to be honestly debated. There are absolutely some things in there that after you write, and that's how all legislation is, where you say, oh, I'm trying to do this, but you recognize another legislature says, yeah, but did you think of this? Or the public says, hey, what about this? The criticism of a piece of legislation when it is first brought out should never be the death knell, because you're impeding the democratic process. You're actually impeding democracy and the ability of the public to engage in that kind of dialogue. That's what it is. That's why the process has so many steps before it gets to the governor's desk. And so I would tell you that it has been absolutely mischaracterized. And we're more than happy to put out what I'd said earlier about how the public records law in 1940 came about and what the intent of it was from 1940 all the way to 2008. But I will tell you that as the Attorney General, then as the governor, but then as the Attorney General, I watched the weaponization of that. I watched how we had to spend taxpayer money on getting not one, but two lawyers working consistently to answer requests that had no really bearing. We had to pour through all kinds of emails and records and other staff that we took away. We took those people away from their important task of actually helping and protecting the people of this state. And so again, I think that we should all take a big, deep breath. You're certainly welcome to criticize the legislature, but don't mischaracterize it, okay? As Senator Cloud moves that through the process. You know what I mean? And maybe the legislation doesn't get passed. But I certainly think even having the discussion that we're having today goes to show that and highlight the weaponization that the law has become. And certainly it was not intended. Well, again, look, I would tell you this. I think if we rolled it back to 2008, or maybe back before we rolled it through 2015. Well, here's what's amazing to me. Okay, many of you who are asking these questions, I know public records requests were made by to the last administration. I know I made them as the Attorney General, and I know they went unanswered. Yet there was no lawsuit. There was no complaining about it. And so what happens is we start to, whether real or not, perceptually, there seems to be a two-tiered system in this country and in this state as well. If you belong to one party, well, maybe you get a hall pass. If you belong to another, well, maybe we prosecute you a little harder, or maybe the amount of scrutiny that the press gives you is a little greater. Or maybe if you're a conservative, then maybe you get more scrutiny than if you tend to be a little more liberal. That's unfair. Okay. And so I don't know. Maybe we should look at that. We could at least afford the legislature an opportunity to honestly debate that while y'all point those things out. But when you're writing, why don't you go back and talk about a little bit of history instead of jumping on the legislation? Why don't you say, well, wait a minute. Did you know why the public records law did you know when it was passed in this state? How many of you that report on this actually went back and said, well, when did this all start? And what was the purpose? And what was the scope? So again, thank you.
You focus a lot on that bill, but local, community groups, conservative groups have come out against it as well.
James, this is really not about that bill. I mean, I hate to just say it, but we need to go back to the subject. Like, this is about Title IX. And, I'm sure the governor and his staff will be happy to answer as many questions as you want to send them about the public records bills. But are there any other questions about the Title IX suit? I don't have that data for you, Tyler. I mean, I know that there are some specific instances that I'm aware of, and I can't tell you exactly how many they are. And here's part of the problem. People cannot complain. They are retaliated against when they complain. They are told there is no one to complain to. You cannot fight it. And that's part of the problem. The rule itself embodies that. It actually, it's now all there in black and white, that the schools will face investigations and potential actions, not only by the Department of Education, but by the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division if they complain. So the student who complains is then threatened with, is then complained about as being harassing another student or engaging in unlawful discrimination. That triggers the requirement that the school investigate and act on it. And if they don't do what the complainant wants them to do, then they can complain further up the chain. They can go directly to the Federal Department of Education and start an investigation by the Federal Department of Education. This chill speech, protected speech, and it also threatens an enormous amount of time and money, not to mention just the grant money. So, I know of some, and I'm not going to talk about those specific examples that people told me in confidence.
Yeah. And look, just to wrap up.
I mean, I understand, you want specifics, but those people told me that in confidence. Part of the problem is that they're retaliated against when they speak out. That's who I'm fighting for. So thank y'all. I appreciate you for being here. I think that it is a very important lawsuit. As far as I know, we're the first to file, but I know that there will be many more coming behind us. And just real quickly, I do want to thank the attorney generals from Mississippi, Idaho, Raul Labrador. Mississippi's Lynn Fitch. Idaho is Raul Labrador, and Montana is Austin Knudsen, and they are in the lawsuit with us.
I was actually going to cover that. And I just want to thank the legislators, the member Bessie that are here, and for all of those that are watching, for all the fathers and mothers out there who are working with their children, with women inside, wanting to accelerate their children into women's sports, looking for an opportunity for them to be able to go to college and to be able to compete on the same playing field as other women as well. This fight today is about you. Thank you so very much.